All right, Bob, it is time for a part two of our protein powder discussion. Excited for this one. I know you are too, because there's a lot to it. We want to touch on some highlights here in terms of protein powder in this episode, covering more specifically some aspects related to plant protein instead of the animal-based protein powders that we spoke of previously. So, Bob, I know when I think of plant protein powder, it seems like a whole world opens up in terms of the products available now and the formulations and nuances therein. But as we dive into this, I wondered, when you think of plant protein powders, what are some common confusion points that you hear from your athletes? And then we can dive into some of these aspects.
Yeah, I think, regarding the confusion points of the challenges, I mean, I would just say what aren't out there. I mean,
Yeah.
it is so confusing, which is why we've devoted just this entire episode to plant-based protein powders because there's so much just to sift through. And remember back in the days,
Oh, Bob, you
remember
did it. That
that?
was
I
like
did that.
2 minute
I
PR. We
know
got
I was
into
pretty
that.
impressed. Back in the days, literally when we thought of protein powder, and this is like we're gonna date ourselves, but it was literally like whey protein and soy protein. I mean, it like the field has come so far. And like I was even doing some research on this, just plant proteins alone, and came up with 9 or 10 different plant-based protein from seeds and from, I mean, you name it. So we've kind of expanded out of just the soy protein, which was so popular back in the days. Now we've got so many different things, from brown rice to hemp to peanut to I mean, you name it, from potato, and I mean, it's all over the place. And that's why it's confusing. And a lot of times for our plant-based athletes, our vegan, vegetarian athletes, but I do have quite a few athletes who are non-vegan, non-vegetarian, still engaging in plant-based protein powders for great health reasons, just to mix it up a little bit. Maybe
Yeah.
they do like the taste a little bit more. So I think no matter what the reason is, for listeners, it doesn't matter which protein powder you're going to choose unless you keep listening to this episode.
Well, I was
Because
going to
it may change your
say,
mind.
yeah, I feel like this is another area to add to our long list. Like, it's not too black and white, and it shouldn't be that plant protein powders are inherently superior, nor are they inherently inferior. There are a lot of if then but scenarios, or
Yeah.
flow charts. So, but we don't want to uber complicate everything. So I think maybe just diving into some of the things, and they're not the characteristics. Some of these things are not going to be unlike what we talked about with the animal based or dairy based protein powders,
Mhm.
things to keep our eyes on. But Bob, okay, where should we? Let's get into it, because
Well,
you gave us some teasers there in the
yeah.
beginning. But
I think it's to start this conversation. I think we might have done it for the previous episode on animal-based protein powders, but I think it's important to understand what essential amino acids are and non-essential amino acids, because now we are getting in the weeds, and a lot of plant-based protein powders do not fit the bill of having all of the essential amino acids. So essential amino acids are the amino acids that our body absolutely needs from food sources. We cannot make them, right?
right.
So when we look at that, we look at the opposite and say, okay, well, non-essential are the amino acids our body can make from other proteins and other sources. So I think that's the biggest thing, because to understand first, because when we talk about plant-based proteins and protein powders, there are quite a few that are missing some or low in some amino acid. So they're not qualified as essential, which means, listeners, if you just rely on plant-based protein powders, you may find that you have some deficiency or lower in certain amino acids. Now, there are ways around that, which we're going to talk about, but that's like in my mind, that's the first and foremost. When an athlete says, hey, I want to do a protein or a plant-based protein powder, I need to look at other things in their nutrition plan first to see, number one, if they are completely vegan, or they are eating some animal-based proteins. Because depending on the plant-based protein powder you choose, we might have to kind of fill that gap with other food-based proteins that are higher or moderate in certain amino acids that might be lower in plant-based protein powders. So I
So
think
you're
that's where I
saying
wanted to start.
kind of what you're saying there, Bob, is putting the whole intake from a protein perspective, the daily intake pattern and context to understand contribution of these kinds of powders or supplements versus the other whole food sources that are in one's
Exactly.
diet or dietary pattern, and kind of seeing where all that falls out from
Yeah.
the essential and non-essential. Also, I think I just wanted to add this newer term. I don't know how new it is, but essential amino acids being equated, or this other term, indispensable
Yeah.
amino acids versus the dispensable. So that's just another term in case people are hearing that in whatever your source of information is, hearing these terms. So yeah, that's super important. I have yet to meet an athlete or active individual who is only subsisting on protein powders for their protein
Yeah,
intake.
right,
But
right. For sure. Well, but I mean, and I'm sure both of us have these examples, and I've worked with athletes in the past, completely vegan, and maybe not knowing their way around veganism too much, right? So maybe they're new, or maybe they're just stuck on certain foods, and then they say, oh, well, I'm just going to get, maybe they don't have a lot of protein in their nutrition plan, so they say, I'm just going to do a whatever protein powder, and obviously it's plant-based. And that's where I find issue is that they're not eating well first, and now they're trying to supplement with a plant-based protein powder that might be low in some amino acids, and they're not, like, the whole puzzle there isn't coming together because they're not eating well in their vegan lifestyle to begin with. And that's
right,
kind of what we're talking about.
good to put that all in context.
Yes.
Because the other thing here, Bob, is what was your last count? I think I had like zillion and one protein powders out there in terms of the
Oh my
plant
gosh.
formulations. And so we can be super savvy, or at least get our knowledge base improved here when we're shopping around and knowing, okay, I'm going to need a little bit more extra, more of that protein to come in.
Mhm.
And some days I can't get it through food for whatever reason. So I want to put my bucks where they matter, and choose
Yeah.
the smartest option for my
Well, and
own
I think,
self.
to that point also, I think consumers and listeners, we need to just be aware of what's happening in the market these days. And with plant-based protein powders, a lot of these food manufacturers are getting very wise, and they're combining plant-based proteins in one powder now. So it's a
Yeah.
combination of two or three or maybe even four different plant-based proteins in one powder, because they're going after the, let's combine all of these, perhaps from a taste perspective, but really from a nutritional essential amino acid perspective. So that's kind of the changing landscape. Again, just a few years ago, we didn't have as many of the blends, but now we do have a lot more of these plant protein blends for the powders.
Yes, Bob, do you want to go over the types of plant protein
Oh yeah.
sources that might be limited in those few
Yep.
essential aminos that you mentioned?
So and literally, I just highlighted, let me just count. I highlighted 9 of them in my research. Now, we know there are more, right? I just
Mm,
highlighted the ones that I feel come up in more discussion with my clientele, with everything. I mean, so the first one I just want to highlight, because it's probably one of the most popular, is pea protein. All
yeah.
right. So pea protein actually comes from, or it's made from yellow split peas, and great source of branched chain amino acids, right? And those are valine, isoleucine, and leucine, and those are the BCAAs everybody hears about, building muscle, and should I have it before a workout and during a workout? That's, BCAAs. Stay tuned for our part 3 of this series, where we're
Mm,
going to discuss BCAAs in relation to amino acids. So back to pea protein. Pea protein, good branch chain amino acids. There's actually been some research putting pea against whey, and pea actually stacked up pretty well in terms of muscle gains, muscle mass gains.
mhm.
So was
Yeah.
very impressed by that. It is low in methionine, so it is lacking in that one amino acid. And this is going to, all these numbers I throw out, it's kind of totally depend on the product and the manufacturer you utilize. But the I guess the premise and the research that I did on this, for 28 grams, which is typically about a scoop, right, if you will, has about 21 grams of protein. So
Mhm.
a fairly, in my mind, a fairly decent plant-based protein, aside from being a little bit low in methionine. There is one, however, because I have used plant-based, or I have used pea protein before, and I don't know, Dina, it is very, how shall I describe this? Very earthy, very earthy.
Oh, you're
Um,
so kind.
I am very kind because I literally could not finish it. I had this big tub and I was like, oh my gosh. I gave it to my mom. She didn't like it. It just,
Mm,
so, maybe food manufacturers, if you're listening, let's try to find a good way without a lot of chemicals and preservatives and all that, crap to actually make pea protein taste good.
should we, Bob, distinguish between pea isolate and pea? Because, some of the companies, it'll say pea protein isolate, and then others will say pea protein. And I feel like it is that isolate that ideally we want to choose more of. So we've got, in essence, more protein instead of all the other stuff that comes in that
Exactly.
particular legume.
Yeah, very similar to the whey, like our discussion with whey. I mean, the isolate is going to be probably one of the best choices out there because it does kind of filter out a lot of the other stuff, if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting more towards the, highly bioavailable protein, which is why we're using a protein powder, is to get to the actual protein and not all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do, while we're on this topic, we probably should mention that a lot of the plant-based protein powders still do have carbohydrates in them, right? So different than like a whey protein powder, which has very little carbohydrates, unless they're adding some for some reason. Plant-based do have a little bit more carbohydrates. So listeners, just consider that, because that, kind of throws off your ratio, the carbohydrate to protein, which is not a bad thing. It's just, you need to realize that if you're going to do a plant-based protein powder, you will receive some carbohydrates from it in addition to protein. So just
Mm-hmm.
keep that in mind, because I still have athletes, D, coming up to me and saying, oh no, it's pure protein. I'm like, nope, you want to check that label, because it's a plant, right? It's going to
Right.
have carbohydrates.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Good.
So anything else that you have with pea
No, I
protein, that
think
is?
just to
As a little
reiterate,
joke. Did you get the
yeah, I
joke?
did get it a little delayed over here. um, I was just going to reiterate the point, high quality of
Yes.
the numerous plant protein. I feel like I have tongue twisters waiting
It
to
is a
happen
tongue twister.
repeatedly.
Yeah.
But of all the plant protein powder sources out there, pea isolate is kind of in that top, the few. If we had a countdown, Bob, maybe we'll save that for end of the year excitement.
Yeah.
But would be in our top priorities, like pea isolate. If we don't have any allergy or sensitivity or whatnot to peas, then that would
For
be a,
sure.
a good choice and is pretty, um, yeah, decent in the amino acid profile and with the research backing it up.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a good thing to point out, Dee. What you mentioned is just, obviously, listeners, if you do have an allergy or an intolerance to one of these vegetable seeds, powders, whatever it is, you do want to consider that first, obviously, just like a
Yeah.
dairy allergy. If you have a dairy allergy, obviously you're not going to do an animal-based or a dairy-based protein powder. So keep that in
Yeah.
mind for sure.
Okay.
Um, okay, the next one, which has kind of been getting a lot of attention, is hemp protein
Mm-hmm.
powder, HEMP. So, obviously there is, from again, from my research, kind of like CBD, there might be a little bit of THC in there, but it is at very minimal levels. So you kind of want
Mm-hmm.
to keep that in mind. It's not obviously going to make you high, but you do want to be very careful in the product that you choose. The great thing about hemp protein powder is that it has higher amounts of omega-3 fatty acids. It's that plant source, which we discussed on a previous episode. It is a great source of magnesium, fiber, iron, zinc. So it's a pretty decent protein powder in terms of the micronutrients. However, it is low in lysine, which is another amino acid, and it doesn't really have a lot of protein per serving relative to, let's say, pea protein. So it's about
Mhm.
half. And again, it depends on the product and the manufacturer, but has roughly half of what pea protein does for the same amount. So another thing to consider. So I feel like there's kind of a trade-off there. Maybe you get a little less protein, but you get some omega-3s, maybe some more micronutrients in there, kind of tossing that up a little bit.
Do you know, Bob, because I didn't look at this too carefully, are there hemp isolates versus just hemp proteins? Because
You
the
know,
like the omega-3 and fiber might not be as
yeah,
high if it's a just more pure hemp source in terms of the protein
yeah.
extraction.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to
Yeah.
research that because you usually just see hemp protein, right? I don't know
Yeah.
if it's made it
Yeah.
to the isolates yet.
I
Yeah.
don't either. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and
Okay.
it's pretty close. I mean, pretty close. Maybe I'm just guesstimating maybe about 10% less essential amino acids than like a pea protein. So again, it's pretty close, but it's going to have a little bit lower protein content.
Got it.
Yeah. Still
I
pretty
have
good though. I've tried that one. It's not bad in terms of flavor.
I was just going to say I have purchased just a hemp protein powder before. And I mean, I'm always adding a little bit of fruit.
Right,
I would
right.
say 9 times out of 10. And so I'm trying to recall exactly like the graininess. I think it was a
Yeah.
little bit more palatable
Hmm.
in my experience than the pea standalone protein. But of course, it depends what else is in your shake and
Yeah.
your own palate. But not too bad. I mean, we could
No,
also just get some hemp seeds and throw that in
exactly.
as well.
Exactly.
But
You know
okay.
what I like to do with all these powders, and irrespective of protein powders, but any powder, I'll actually I'm sure some of our listeners have heard of dry scooping before. It's where you take a dry scoop of whatever and put it in your mouth. I don't go to that extreme, but I put a little taste, like a little, little dash of that powder in my hand and I consume it dry because I want to actually get the flavor of it without anything yet. And
Hmm.
sometimes that'll actually dictate where I use it, to be honest with
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Like how
Hmm.
it will maybe like pea protein, I know it's going to completely change the profile of most of my smoothies, right? So I have to
Yeah.
really like be concerted, make a concerted effort for that. But that might be something that listeners you want to do if you try these things. Just take a little bit out of a spoon or whatever, and just try it dry. And if it tastes decent dry and it's not too strong of a taste, it will likely go into any mixture that you can put it into without changing the taste profile. And that's I mean, at the end of the day, we need to look at these protein powders because we don't want them to be a, plug your nose and drink it kind of a thing. We want it to be still an enjoyable process with other foods that you're adding to it. So, I think back in the days we used to take protein powders and do that, like plug our nose and say, down the
Yep.
hatch, right? We're just drinking it for function and not for taste. And nowadays, I think we can actually get more for taste and function.
Yes.
Yeah.
The beauty of advancements.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't
So
have to be a plug your nose
I know.
experience.
Although on that little tangent, I think we need to really look at the ingredients that some of these plant-based and animal-based protein powders are putting in the actual product because they're making it taste good. I'm just thinking about all these crazy, like whatever Fruit Loops or cocoa, whatever, flavoring we
Bacon
have.
powder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, that might sound good. But then you look at the ingredients and you're like, oh, it has these dyes, it has these artificial colorings or sugars or whatever. And you're like, ooh, maybe it starts with a good hemp protein, pea protein, whatever. But now they're adding all this crap to it that's really not making it great for our body or our brain anymore. So I think that's a really good, kind of a caution flag to throw out there for our listeners.
Paying attention to the ingredients, aside
Yeah,
from noting the protein sources and types, the quality of that formulation, which we did talk about in our part 1 at length. So be sure to visit that episode as well to get a refresher on the importance of the ingredients and the impact.
exactly.
All right,
All right.
Bob, you're
Next on
doing a
my list was
countdown.
pumpkin seed.
Yeah, love.
This, I have to tell you, probably about 10 years ago, if you'd have told me pumpkin seed was going to come into a protein powder, I would have thought you were crazy, like
Mm-hmm.
absolutely crazy, right? But it's really emerged. I mean, it's really becoming popular nowadays. And again, pumpkin seed for a scoop or for a normal serving, it's fairly close to like a pea protein. So my data, looked at had 18 grams of protein per serving. Again, that's going to depend on the manufacturer and the product. But again, pumpkin seed, I believe, it does have that earthy, grainy taste still. It's not as a powerful as a taste of like pea protein, but again, it's still low in threonine and lysine. So now I've got two amino acids that's a little bit low in. However, it's still a good source of magnesium, zinc, and iron. So that plant source of iron. So I don't know, pumpkin seed is kind of on the top of my favorites to use now because it will change the taste profile a little bit, but it's not as profound as something like pea protein.
I have no experience with that one in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, taste wise, I'm not sure what to comment on, but yeah, looking at the quality of it, and profile and so forth seems like a good one. And I know there are a number of companies incorporating that in one of those blends that you were speaking of.
Well, isn't it funny, like just looking overall, like again, from when I started the intro or we started talking about this and how protein powder has evolved so much. And now we've got so many plant-based and like, even in what I've been reading also is we talk about the impact on the earth too, right? And the soils and how, the carbon emissions and all that. So, there are, of course, there's pros and cons to everything. But my point is this, there are more plant-based protein powders popping up like pumpkin seed, like hemp, where we probably wouldn't have thought that these are going to be put in a protein powder, right?
Yeah.
But they're great options for sure. So pumpkin seed is definitely up there for me.
Great. What do you have next, Bob?
Next, I've got brown rice protein.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting because, again, we're both dietitians and, how many times have we said, oh, yeah, brown rice, it's a great source. It's whole grains and a great source of fiber and carbohydrates. Well, we never really thought about it for its protein content, but it's pretty decent, comparatively within the whole plant-based protein category of having essential amino acids. It's pretty decent. It is, again, low in lysine, that amino acid. It has a good source of branch chain amino acids, those 3 branch chains, and it has a decent amount of protein per serving. So it's right around that 21, 22 grams of protein per serving. Now, my experience with brown rice, I've not had too much of it, but I don't think it tastes horrible. I don't think it really manipulates the taste profile too much if you're going to put it like in a smoothie or a shake. I think one thing we do need to consider is, from my research that I've read, is the potential for contamination of arsenic, right? Just because, so we need to make sure, back to your point, Dina, make sure the company, the manufacturer that you're purchasing this from has done their due diligence. They've done the testing. They've got a high quality product and they've got arsenic testing specifically, because I think that's one thing that comes up when you see brown rice protein.
I have seen those reports over the years, something to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So do you have any experience with brown rice protein?
Again, it's in combination with some of the other plant blends. So that's
the hard part, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, it was part of 3.
Exactly. I was going to say hemp, but what I meant to say is the pea isolate in conjunction with the brown rice. I think companies like Momentous, they're looking, paying attention to this amino acid profile and combining these couple sources to really maximize the profile and the quality of what we get. And then also just that notion of trying to make it tasty, or at least not plug your nose factor. Level 10 there on the plug your nose. So yeah, more in that combination is my experience with the brown rice protein.
I would definitely not want to be a food scientist, just because there's to make some of these things taste good is very difficult. It has to be difficult. Okay, next on my list is the one that has been around forever, and that's what we traditionally thought of as plant protein powder, and that is soy protein powder. Now, it's got, I don't know. Since I've been in this trade 25, 30 years now, it's always either gotten a really bad rap or a not so bad rap, right? Because of the benefits or the issues or challenges with soy. Now, here's the thing though, soy protein, it is a complete protein. It provides all the essential amino acids, right? Now, of course, we need to be careful if you have an allergen or an allergy to soy. Also need to be careful of GMO, so genetically modified with the crops and the soybeans, obviously. But the protein is up there. It's per serving, it's right around that 22 grams. And I mean, you can't complain about the quality of it in terms of what it provides from a protein standpoint and amino acid standpoint. And
Mhm.
I think because it's been around for so long, I think a lot of companies have really perfected the taste of soy protein.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it is another one, Bob, when we're speaking of concentrates or
Mm,
isolates or the whole intact, source, it is one where if we're determining to use soy protein powder, that I would vote in this context. I think most often I'd vote for the isolate, although there are
for sure.
situations where, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of the foods that have been fortified or they're vegetarian,
Mm,
vegan, and they use soy isolate. Sometimes you're getting into Franken food categories there with a
totally.
whole bunch of other additives and things. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, in the powder aspect, the isolate, I think most often will get you more bang for your buck.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think you have to kind of watch, like you were saying, to the Franken foods and, what these things are added to. But if it's just the
Yeah.
powder itself, again, there's going to be naysayers. There's going to be supporters of
Hmm.
soy in general. And,
Yeah.
listeners, I think you need to consider that for yourself and your own personal, nutrition journey and health needs and, athletic performance, fitness needs. And if soy is part of that and it fits well, absolutely. If it doesn't, then there's no reason to. There are other plant protein powders to choose. So,
Yeah.
we're not pushing it, but we're just kind of giving you the facts.
Right. Okay, Bob. Well, I know you're doing a little countdown here.
I
What's
am doing a
what's
countdown.
next on your
The
list?
next one is sunflower seed powder, protein
Okay.
powder. Sunflower seeds, which I grew up eating sunflower seeds, Dina. That was one of my favorite pastimes.
From the
From the
whole
whole kernel, yeah. Yeah,
kernel,
because it
yes.
because it gave, as kids, it gave us something to do, right?
Plus
Because
you
we
look
didn't have
cool like
we
the
didn't have
baseball players.
smartphones or anything. I mean, we didn't even have video games, kind of, sort of. So it's like, oh yeah, put a handful of these salted or sunflower seeds,
That's
and
funny.
I just remember it's like a baseball player chewing, right?
Oh
And I used to
yeah,
have these big
exactly.
cheekfuls. I used to stack one cheek of sunflower seeds with the kernels, and then once I got, which is kind of difficult to do, but once I got the seed out and ate that, I shifted the shell to the other cheek, right? Because I didn't want to spit them on the ground, right? So, which a lot of people do. But anyway,
Funny.
that's a side story. Anyway, sunflower
Mhm.
seed protein powder is low in lysine, and it's actually kind of low in protein, respectively. I mean, comparatively speaking, with all the protein powders. So it's very similar to a hemp seed protein powder in terms of quantity of protein. So it has about 13 grams of protein per serving. And again, like I said, it's low in lysine. So again, great source, but we just need to kind of consider that, yeah, it is a seed and it has a lot of beneficial micronutrients, but in terms of protein, it may not be the top of the list.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think I've ever tried a sunflower seed protein powder. I've only eaten the seeds.
No, the only company that comes to mind using sunflower, and we're not trying to be biased here towards any companies, but I'm just thinking
Yeah.
of some popular
Yeah.
products out there, like the Vega Sport protein
Yep.
powder, I believe is a blend of
Mhm.
sunflower. I'll have to look at my notes here, but
Yeah.
I believe they do use, yeah, sunflower, pumpkin, and pea
Yeah.
protein. So they're getting
Okay.
a
Okay.
good mix.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's that wonderful blend that we were talking about. I do think there are
Yeah.
a few handfuls of good protein powder companies out there. Maybe we can mention those at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, who are kind of doing a good job in terms of safety, legality,
Hmm.
third-party testing, some blends. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So sunflower seed protein powder, not much to say, just that it's low in lysine and a little bit lower in protein.
All right. Yeah, I
The
don't have anything
next
to add.
one is kind of an offshoot to sunflower seed. It's chia seed protein powder.
Hmm.
So we've always consume chia seeds, little black or white seeds, and throw them in a smoothie or whatever. And those are the ones that love getting stuck in your teeth. So you don't want to dry scoop those because you'll just have a mouthful when you smile. You just have a mouthful of black or white seeds in your teeth. But chia seeds, nonetheless, great source of fiber, great source of omega-3 fats from the plant-based. It is low in lysine and again, a little bit less protein per serving. So now we're talking around 10 grams of protein per scoop or per serving of a protein powder. So a little bit lower on the protein, but I don't know, Dean. I mean, I don't think I would choose chia as a protein
Yeah.
powder, but the benefits of eating chia seed are just amazing. Like I try to put chia seeds in anything I can, but I don't know if I'd use it as a protein powder because it is kind of lacking in the
Right.
protein quantity.
Yeah. That's where that combination, I keep saying this every time you go
Yeah,
through one, I'm like, oh, hey, but we could combine it with another one
yes,
and then we're kind of getting close. But
exactly.
yeah, by itself. Eh.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is kind of exciting. And when I was first, when was this? This was probably 2019 or 2020. I was looking into my first product from my All Around Snack Co. Gourmet Snack Mix, and I was looking at which nuts, which seeds to put in. And I came across this. So it was really interesting to come across it again in my protein powder research. It's called Sacha Inchi,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
a
Yep.
seed. And I remember I'm like, I had no idea what this was years ago. So I bought them and I taste them. I'm like, okay, they're interesting. And again, everyone has their own taste palette. I thought they kind of tasted a little bit fishy, which
Hmm.
was really weird, but that's what my taste palette picked up. Anyway, this seed, it's interesting because it has a really decent amount of protein per serving. So it has right around 17 grams per serving. It is low in lysine, but here's the benefits of this too. It has good omega-3 fats, the plant-based omega-3 fats. It's relatively higher in arginine, the amino acid arginine, which is a precursor to nitric oxide, which helps our blood vessels. And I don't know, it is super high in price because there is very low supply right now, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to pay a lot for this protein powder. In fact, I don't know if I did a cost. Oh no, I did a cost analysis on another one, but I was pretty shocked. I'm like, wow, I don't know if I'd go to that extreme, but still amazing benefits in terms of nutrient density and other nutrients in it. So I think, if I had a rotation of maybe Sacha Inchi protein powder, I think I would include it in my rotation for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah.
I do have some personal experience with that
Oh,
one,
do
Bob.
you?
Same
Yeah.
deal, like years ago, hearing about it or discovering it and then wanting to find out more. And I believe, is it from South America? I forget
Yep.
exactly
Yep.
where, but where it's harvested primarily. But yeah, when you mentioned the fishiness, I don't know exactly what that flavor is. Um, to compare it to, but that's close to what
Yeah.
my sensory picked up is like, ooh, I wanted it to be buttery, like a pecan or
Yes.
something, just
Yes.
like because it smelled a little buttery, and then the
Yep.
taste did not align with buttery,
No, kind of threw you off a little bit.
unless buttery fish is a thing. But yeah, but
I don't think that
definitely
is a thing, although
pricey
it could be.
per
Yeah. Oh,
serving.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Even just the
So,
little seeds themselves, I was like, wow. I mean,
yeah.
that's actually one reason I did not include them in my gourmet snack mix because the price point was so
Oh,
high
mm-mm,
that, I mean, no consumer would buy that, right? I mean, but
mm-mm.
again, I think if you want to try something new, I think definitely like let's
Oh,
let's
yeah.
put that in there because yeah, I
I
think
would
it'd be
rank
worth
that
it.
one up
Yeah, for
pretty
sure.
high. Okay.
Okay. Are we ready for my last one of the list?
Yeah. Did you order these in any particular?
I actually did not.
Okay.
No.
Just being
No.
sure. I
Oh no,
wasn't
yeah.
picking up
Yeah.
a pattern
Now,
other than you started with a good powerhouse with the pea protein.
I wanted to start with that one, and I
Yeah.
specifically wanted to end with this one because
Mm,
it's a little it's a little edgy, I guess,
all
right?
right.
And I think pure vegans would know what this is, but a lot of people aren't going to know what spirulina
Oh,
powder
yeah.
is.
Yep.
Yeah, right. So it's really interesting if you look at it because I actually had to research this. It is what is called a cyanobacteria, which is also we think of this also as blue-green algae, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about that, it's like this is the most greenish bluish powder you could probably ever get. It's almost like a neon, right? And like I've tried this and a little goes a long way in terms of really the taste, but also the
Yeah.
color. Like I've really messed up smoothies before with this, right? Because it's just amazing. One serving will give about 16 grams of protein. So it's kind of moderate for sure. but spirulina is like a favorite to vegans and many other people too, because it
Yeah.
is a powerhouse for vitamins, for minerals, omega-3 fats. It is and has all the essential amino acids. And it claims, a lot of people claim it to be detoxifying in the body also.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've got my experience we could talk about. It's a powerhouse, though. I mean, honestly, but here's the thing, which I look at, like I've used a tablespoon before, which is nowhere close to a serving, which is usually about a quarter cup, somewhere around there. And 1 tablespoon is so overwhelmingly in its taste profile.
Yeah.
For me, at least, it's very difficult to find a good use for it.
Okay. So it's not easy to cover up. Like just add a little blueberry and we're
No,
good.
no,
Or
no, no. You'd have to add a
okay.
lot of blueberries.
Okay.
Yeah.
I trust you
Yeah. Have you
because
ever
I
tried it? You
haven't.
haven't tried
No,
it? Oh
no.
my
But
goodness.
I mean, we'll add that to the list of
Yeah.
130,000 experiments to run.
Right.
But
I have this bag in my pantry and it's still, I put it out at eye level because I challenge myself. I'm like, how can I better try this? And I looked at recipes. So, hey, listeners, by the way, if you
ooh,
figured out a really good way to use spirulina or blue green algae protein powder,
yeah.
please email us hello@insidesportsnutrition.com. I would love to know how you use this because I've looked and I've searched and I've tried and I still cannot figure out how to use a good quantity of it to justify its protein. But here's the thing too, like I've also used it to say, listen, I'm not using it as a protein anymore. I'm using it as a good or a good omega-3 source, a great, vitamins, minerals, because it is solid. It's just really difficult to use.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that was my top. I think I covered 9. Was it
There's
9? Let's see
so
if
many though, Bob, like you
there's so
mentioned.
many.
I
Oh my
mean, there
gosh.
are oat proteins. We've got potato protein powder popping up, even corn
Hmm.
derived, and different other grains that just aren't maybe as common. I mean, even wheat. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it just runs the gamut here. I think I wanted to mention something too, and I believe we talked about this in part one, is like what is the purpose behind using it? If is this to just supplement your daily protein, or is this post workout
Hmm.
recovery nutrition? Because the leucine content, that essential amino acid that's responsible partly for that whole signaling of muscle protein synthesis repair, the leucine content of the plant protein powders, when you match per 100 grams or 25 grams, it is not to the caliber of something like a whey isolate. So, and I think Stu Phillips talked about this a little bit in our pod with him. So, if we're using, and again, we have to put all this in context, but with plant proteins, sometimes we need a little bit more of it to match if we're looking for a certain amount of leucine.
Yeah, it's
Um,
absolutely right. I think most of the cases, most of these protein powders, I think from a research study that we both looked at, is you're talking about maybe even half of the leucine
yeah,
percentage wise
exactly.
from
Yeah.
like a plant-based versus a whey protein base. So that is a
Right.
huge thing to consider, especially because that one essential amino acid is so important in so many body functions.
So maybe Bob will link to a couple of these papers for the nerdy types out there that want to do their homework and really look at the aspects of the specific proteins that we've been talking about, just to get a sense. If you are, let's say, vegan and you are using some of these powders for your recovery nutrition, maybe if you're looking just at the total protein per serving and you think you're close, but you're not, perhaps not making your leucine threshold, eh, oh gosh, learning now I need 1.5 scoops or whatever the amount of protein
Yeah,
to get your desired amino acid requirements met for the specific
absolutely.
purpose.
Yeah, it's a good thing to bring up for sure because I think the purpose and the context is what matters. Like, why am I using this? Do I need one that has more leucine? Do I need one that tastes better? Do I need one that has more protein total protein? Do I need one that
Yeah.
has more omega-3? So it does really help. Like, why am I using it? I think when we look at animal protein, if we look at like a whey protein, we know why we're using it. We want to get good quality protein, fast protein, and good leucine, right? Check, check,
Mm-hmm.
check. But with plant proteins now, this is like one of my ending messages is really, I think my conclusion for most listeners would be try a blend of
Yeah.
plant protein powders in the same product. I mean, you can blend your own if you want to, but that's why these companies are doing this now, to get the best of all worlds. And that's where I would start first, is by going with a blend and not just a single plant-based protein powder first.
I'm going to back you up on that one, Bob. Yep.
All right.
With
I
you
appreciate that, Dee.
100%. Let's see what else. I mean, that is a great message to end on, I think.
Yeah. Oh,
Understanding. Yeah.
yeah, we were going to mention. So I think like leaving that message, but also maybe some of our favorite brands, because
Oh,
you
yeah.
actually said a couple of them, and I've got just one that I wanted to mention. When it comes to plant-based protein powder. So you mentioned, what was the first one you mentioned?
Yeah.
Momentous.
Yeah, the momentous. And again, this ties to what we mentioned in our first part episode here, talking about plant protein or animal derived protein powders,
Yeah.
is those companies that do provide you the amino acid breakdown. Again, it might seem in the weeds, listeners, but the more you can learn about these products, I think also you're validating the investment that you have in these products. But when you can visually see, okay, they've taken the time to analyze the composition of these formulations, especially if it is a blend of plant proteins, and being able to see the breakdown, it can just assure you you're getting what you
Mhm.
need, especially if you are using it for recovery nutrition purposes. So the Momentous company does a great job with that. The other one I mentioned, Bob, is the Vega
Mhm.
company. And so their formulations are pretty decent as well for their blends.
Yeah, I like them
Um,
in Vegas Sport. So this is important
Sport,
for
yeah.
Vega because they have their sport line, which
Mm,
is NSF certified.
yeah.
Their other lines, I do not believe are NSF certified for sport. Just FYI for what that's worth.
Yeah. What do you have a few others that you
I like,
tend
I
to
really
recommend?
like Now Foods also.
Oh, yeah.
I think they do a bang up job with all their protein powders, and they're Informed Sport certified.
Yep.
So they do have that third party testing credential next to theirs. But yeah, they're doing, I mean, I like their quality control, and I like what they're doing, and I like their plant or their protein blends. In addition, like I've used their animal based protein powders for a very long time also. But I think those three are pretty solid. I mean, there's so many out there, right? But
Yeah.
those are just three that come to our head. I know, UCAN uses pea protein in one of their energy plus protein powders. So there's a lot of companies that are adding it to protein powders, or even just other things to try to make it more plant-based focused and plant-based friendly.
Hmm. Bob, I can't wait for a future episode. It's on our long, long list of talking about mushrooms and
Oh,
mycoprotein. And
yes.
I mean, I was just getting excited, thought of delving into that, because that was one that I had seen on the list of being incorporated into plant protein
Yeah,
powders, is the mycoprotein. So stay tuned for that one. It'll be
absolutely. That'll be a
fascinating.
good one to discuss.
Yeah. Good. Well, listeners, I'm sure you've got, aside from maybe some of you having some recipes to share with us, but sending on any questions as you're investigating your own protein powder selection, maybe what you've got in your stash. Don't forget to shoot us an email over at hello@Inside Sports Nutrition. Let us know what's happening with your protein powder choices and how you're evolving those.
Yes, please do. We would love to hear from you, and just your ideas too. If you have questions,
Yeah,
great. But if you have ideas on how you incorporate these different plant proteins into your daily lifestyle, we would love to know, because we're always looking for little tidbits that we can share with others.
sounds good, Bob. All
All
right.
right.
Well,
Well, I think this is a good wrap to this episode, huh?
yes. And we will have a part 3 talking about branched chain amino acids as well. So stay tuned for that one coming up.
Looking forward to that one. It's
All
just
right.
it's just all protein-based education, at least with this series.
I mean, I feel a little Popeye right now, Bob.
Gonna go eat some spinach for you
My
listeners that didn't catch
spinach
that reference.
protein powder. Wait.
I think that's going to be the next thing.
Okay.
I was going to say that earlier, spinach protein powder. Figure that one out.
All right, Bob.
All right, listeners, we appreciate you being here. Appreciate you always tuning in. Please share with others so everyone can benefit from what Dina and I are sharing with you. So until next time, we wish you the best and we will catch you on the next episode.